Man, it's been a while since I've really tried to tackle these, but here we go. We're gonna try to do one up and keep busy here. So we're looking at what is the irrational number, Planck's constant, sigma n n. We can't exactly cross these n out, but we should. More likely, this is about the speedal causal of light, which is what 670 million miles. I think the sun is away from the Earth. If I'm not mistaken, it takes about 8 seconds. Now, again, that's hard math to prove. You're going to have to try to figure that stuff out to help you build a catalyst to help you remember that. It's some tool trick. You got that number you have to remember or something like that. Well, I try to use sigma myself because it'll help me get into this. What part of the environment, in this case, a mill floor or some grow lab, you want a red solo cup, a sunflower seed, right on. We can do that. The red solo cup equals kind of like hello world, but a little different. You're still writing out the equation like that, but here we're replacing all of these symbols with a real number. We don't necessarily know whether it's a sunflower or anything else, mustard seed, double coconut. The smallest distance is the seed, but it's quantified by any of the variables, so that's what's over it. The independent feature is bigger than the sum of the capital delta and lowercase delta. If you think about it like a soldier, that's an infinity, and while their kid with high probability comes into the statistical analysis of sigma, little sigma, to reference what little delta would be about there. And we're going to subtract that from the sunflower. Basically, we've reduced it down to n. We're saying that that's in some level of an Ingling's angle or a base form of what it does, because speed of light is an n number. Without it, you got to have the breakdown of parts, and whether they be here and here, here and here, or the equation in itself, that 3 means going to come up in there of probability distribution. It could be a high spike, it could be a low spike. We got that grade index. That's why you chose sunflower over something else. And that's because you're better with gauging that model as far as what time is, right? I'm trying to recreate sunshine here with a sunflower seed, but I can't necessarily say I understand the basis of it until I put it at 0. Red solo cup out there, sunflower, sun, any model of conditions, and they become the time. So you can see at the start, middle, and end of the equation, we're actually dealing with the end, middle, and the beginning of the equation. We noticed, let's continue here to time. Now this is a bracketed series, and brackets are like bracket in Feynman's work. It's an oxymoron that I use it in the material, but essentially use it backwards. We're going to say LMN is this way, but we're still writing it like JavaScript code. It's got to read one of these symbols before I can start taking that dev, adding some points inside of it, and then click and copy multiple of those standards. But let's come back up here to the top of that wave function is an M. It's a dev. It's also a button. And it's a dev or a button that says you could do that either way here. Both of those features are happening. They're not exactly a multiple of each other because this symbol doesn't directly next to them serve the order of operations to say you have to multiply them with an A1 torture test, because you'll have a difference of how you divide by 0 or what happens when you divide by 0. It's probably actually stuff, but what's happening at that level is too independent to the red solo cup, right? It might be the lighting conditions has a variable you need to change, therefore Kelvin the lights, or the watering regimen is something that changes. Technically, your lights aren't going to change much, but sunshine certainly will. That's going to tilt with an angular 23-degree tilt of the Earth and stuff like that. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you inside of here. Like, how do you eventually learn to remember those materials? And again, it's just by just hammering astrology out, hammering quantum physics out, just taking in these videos. making sure that you're pushing all the way through them. And it can be very difficult. You're going to want to kick out. You already know the material. Sorry, getting back off here. E is your model of energy. It is E, the electron. We take that, sell it, turn it into kilowatt hours for the house, realistically. Or colloidal, or any other form, or I is like the capital form of the Hamiltonian, not Planck's constant, that says this is energy. This is the form of energy when we think MC, the sun. So a coronal event, the most largest event, you would argue seedling phase, vegetation, and flower and harvest. And again, trying to keep a model of the sunflower here. It's good for all-around usage. When we're applying that, again, we're going to minus the number in itself. It's kind of like growing a sunflower seed. You don't necessarily need your log charts, but the log charts become that Visual Studio Code for the Linux environment that you're working. And here, in this case, this specific Linux is just a Droid, so I would have to recreate this standard of it in a time-dependent operator, because this is time-dependent. I may not break convention if I'm going to stay with this level of time dependency, because I might be looking for a certain key, but it's not true. It's only partially true to, let's say I create that and perfectly my situation is something different. Well, then I'm subtracting one of those numbers from this, which is going to give me a different time system, which is over what we consider this smaller number. That's more important in this case to divide that way. 1 over 2 is a half. 2 over 1 is something very different. But here they can work that way. And explicitly in ones and zeros. It gets way more complicated when you're trying to figure out arc signs and major and minor arc signs, stuff like that. But it's also one of the easiest ways to do it. Essentially, we're taking the smallest distance of teaching somebody that red solo cup for major and minor arc signs. You have major signs, you have minor arc signs when it comes to the angles. Because of probability distribution and how that works 3-mean, here again we have what could be potentially argued as a sigma, an environment where the rate of change in energy is keyed to its early form. That's the zenith of vegetation, germination before she starts walking over into the vegetation stages of it. Still a little plant, hasn't developed all its true things. There's going to be a phase between A to B where there's the most ideal position between the 3 points on the middle one, close as you can get to it, about why that would be considered its zenith. You're starting to phase out, change your regiments, or maintain gravity and adjust for us. Scientifically, you just death particle, but once you would know that, you would know for true that that is a hard variable inside of their natural number, if you will. And you'll see many of them. You can make them up if you wanted. There's no reason that you couldn't take this whole equation out and just replace all the sigmas or all the v's with some set of numbers. As long as we're conserving of energy by doing this, by changing in all the positions, well, then there's no reason it couldn't work. We're just saying for classical reasons about earlier predictabilities that are time dependent that you want to do this. And they can be whatever. If you know NP well enough, I'm not going to need to drop too many subject matters for you to try for a case study, but you're more than welcome to. Those are very integral, just to skip it down here without running long. Very integral to the situation. Again, we are now changing the intensity, where it was N, where's the N? And now we're changing it to its mass, its space coordinates, not necessarily its energy coordinates or time coordinates. Time would be the coronal event, how long it lasted, potential parts. Here again, the mass of that, it's always in flux, but it's way more fixed now, like a coronal event in that form. So a set theory variable, I'd imagine. Omega set inside of omega. Bones is bones, you know what I mean? Usually it's a Gödel incompleteness or humanity clip that comes with it, flesh, bone, and monkey. But some thoughts.